when we were losing dollars by spending more money than we thought we would, we were gaining more dollars because the market was appreciating at a quicker rate. So bad timing or good timing to build a 10-unit townhome project in Salt Lake City? Well, we're going to give two different examples throughout this videos of whether it was good or bad. I think it's a mixture of both. But to get started, I want to introduce you to my partners on this deal. We got Jared Hall and Adam Hall, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves really quick.
So I am Jared Hall. I'm with Developed Design Architecture and one of Matt's partners on this. Developed, we do a bunch of multifamily in the Salt Lake area.
And I'm Adam Hall, general contractor, Jared's older and dumber brother. It took a long time to get used to that, but I have accepted that's my role in our partnership. And I've been doing contracting stuff for many years. We've done almost 10 years ago. We started our first Salt Lake City multifamily project, and I've done 100 and something flip houses on my own, not involved with them. So little variation between the two, but yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. It's been like 10 years.
I know, it's crazy. And you're the only one with hair. So that's good.
Still. And I'm like ready to pull it out most of the time.
Our first project that we did was not too far from here, just down the street in what we call the Guadalupe area, where we did four condos, and that kind of cemented our relationships to do more. And fast forward, we're talking about, the hook here was good or bad in developing. And we kind of want to review two of our townhome projects, starting with one that we sold out of in 2022, but we had started it and bought it in late 2019, I think, 2020.
Construction started mid 2020.
So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Now we're going to go back and learn kind of the details of the good and the bad. So the good on this one was when we finished and sold it. The bad on this one was during the time that we were building it. It was during COVID. And as you guys will remember, construction prices went through the roof because of supply and demand. Lumber, I think we probably bought lumber on that project at the peak of the market.
Yeah. And the lumber on that was nuts. I felt like I was a drug dealer, meeting random people in random places that happen to have a trailer of lumber somewhere is how to buy lumber it's here in Salt Lake. I was buying it from a lumber store out in Vernal who was sourcing it from a place up in Ogden. It was just this crazy situation with the lumber.
And it was so expensive. So it wasn't just that. And we'll come back to the budget numbers on it. But the quick summary is we ended up spending, I think, about $75,000 more per unit than what we originally estimated from when we bought it. We kind of nailed the timeline. We took a little bit longer, but that wasn't...
Yeah, the permitting took a lot longer because we submitted for permit in January of 2020. And COVID happened and just cities stopped talking to you for 2 months.
That's right.
Well, and then we had to start over because the neighbor decided he wanted to sell to us. So we went from applying for a permit for 5 units to 10 units.
To 10 units.
Kind of started that over again.
Well, so now's a good time. I know we're going a little bit out of order, but we're going to wrap it all up. But Jared, talk a little bit about when your skill set is so precise when it comes to the architecture and design of projects, but more than that, also in that work that no one really sees about how to analyze if a property could be what we're thinking it will be, how to work with the city. If you could talk for a minute about, from your perspective of, how you go about and kind of the key points to look at when you're considering developing, I guess specifically in any city, but maybe specifically in Salt Lake.
Yeah. So the first step is always getting into any specific city's zoning code. And zoning codes, every city writes their own. And so they're all written different and there's scatter requirements all over these 700-page documents that you have to kind of work your way through to finding all the little, not necessarily gotchas, but they are gotchas that prevent you from being able to do what you want to do. So here, this zone allows really minimal setbacks, no density limits. So we could have built a much bigger project, but townhomes kind of work for us financially a lot. But getting into like looking at the floor area ratios or the number of units allowed on a property.
So where would you go? Like if starting from ground zero, where would you go to kind of learn that?
So on a new project, the thing I always do is just go to Google and search city zoning map, and then you'll get the zoning map from that city and find the property address and see what zone that is in, and then Google city zoning ordinance, Salt Lake City.
So the ordinance would be, another word for an ordinance would be like what's allowed, like what you can actually do in the zone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the zoning code is the city level laws that allow you to do whatever it is you can do on a property.
So it sounded like too, there's a consideration where just because you can do it, does it actually mean it will financially make sense? So for example, we could have put 30 condos or something like that on that same site.
On the site over at Axioms, we could have put like a 6-story apartment building with 30 something units in it per the zoning code, but
financially it would never have made sense.
It didn't make sense.
So you always got to be looking at the highest and best use of that land based on your resources, your abilities, your capabilities, and what ultimately will produce. I mean, we're in this, to make neighborhoods better, I guess, but we're also capitalists, right? We want to return on our money. And so we ended up with, 10 townhomes that made sense. But okay, so you've understood what the zoning is, what the code or what's permitted. And then who else do you need generally to help you get from that point to where you might have a project that the city says, great, here's a building permit, go ahead and build it?
So if you kind of get the basic zoning stuff, like, I think I know what I can do here, then you start reaching out to different city departments, and each city has a different process for that. But you'll talk to like the public utilities people, and like on that project over there, if we were going to do the apartments, we would have had to install a great big water line, which is one of the reasons why we didn't. Yep. But the townhomes didn't need that water line. Or making sure in that project there was no storm sewer anywhere near, so we had to design it slightly differently to accommodate the storm sewer. And then also always checking with the different fire marshal in any municipality. They have immense control over what projects can.
Let's say that one more time. The fire marshal has a lot of influence and say.
A lot of influence, and a lot of the fire codes are written such a way that any individual fire marshal can tweak them both less stringent and more stringent, just depending on how they want it to be.
So the who for this, like you've talked about what needs to be done from your experience. Maybe if you're new, I don't know, like when you don't know what you don't know, it's kind of hard and you're just like, but like who might be the right person to help you navigate some of this if you haven't done it before?
So early on, either talking to an architect like developed, or talking to civil engineers often kind of help with a lot of this early phase stuff. They get a little less into, they'll just give you kind of a building outline versus an architect will give you a little more building plus the site stuff. And architects normally, if they've worked in a city a lot, start to have some relationships, because as with all city staff, like it's sometimes hard to get them on the phone, but if they know your phone number, it's a little easier to.
So it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe this is a great example. It's kind of like you need to know the recipe, and the guys that have the skill set to give you the recipe, meaning they can do a survey, they can take the survey, put it on paper, then they can use AutoCAD or whatever to give you the dimensions of what's going to be allowed to fit where. And we're going to show you some before and afters of what that looks like. But basically the architect, the civil, the engineers, they're going to help kind of like create that recipe for what you're going to build.
Yeah. And one of the things that's important, like when you start having those conversations early with an architect, is defining with them that you don't want a full set of building permits. You just want to know if this is possible, and sort of making sure you're taking things in chunks, because architects, like everyone, get really excited and they'll design you a whole well-detailed building that you've paid often $100,000 or more for these designs, and then find out there's a problem. Some others,
and then
you're going slow.
So you're kind of speaking to like how to identify the opportunity, how to make sure it's going to work, how to get the approvals with the city, and we're skipping a lot of the details, but at some point then, now let's take our hats back as like we're the owners and the developers. What are some of the considerations that we're doing to see if mathematically it makes sense? And this is probably where Adam's going to jump in, because there's kind of like a couple of different components. You got to know how to build it, which the architect and the engineers are going to lay out that roadmap of like, this is what you're building. We need to know how much it's going to cost, right? And then we need to know, okay, if we build it for all that, it costs that much, what can we sell it or rent it for? So at what point is it appropriate, would you say, to bring, someone like Adam in that's going to build the thing?
So it sort of depends on how you're setting up your partnership. Ideally, what's worked well for us and what I see work well for most newer people is the contractor is a partner in the development, and they are brought in very early as well.
Yeah.
So they can help with some of those things.
And Adam, when you're coming in, what are you looking for from your lens as the guy that's going to build it?
The plans of, okay, what's going to be happening here, and we'll take the plans and kind of go through and make a fairly detailed cost estimate of, okay, we're going to be, and I've done this enough, I now have a pretty good idea of what all of the line items would be for a project like this. And for my estimate, it's, I think, in the ballpark of like 50 different items that we detail out. And so I'm able to go in and say, okay, we've got this many units, it's cost roughly this much per thing for them. And I'm able to come up with a budget number fairly quickly of, okay, looks like it's going to be about this many dollars for the project. And then that's just the hard costs, which there's a lot of other expenses that we all need to discuss and kind of get a budget number gathered up. I mean, there's 32 different things to kind of end up being, okay, based on construction being this portion of the budget, we still have this portion, so our total costs are X. How do we get X plus that capitalist profit that Matt was talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've now put the pieces together with, okay, what Jared's designed. Now there's an estimated dollar amount to like what it's going to cost to realize, that plan. This is kind of a 3D model of a different project, but imagine Jared's said, this is what we're building. Adam's now put dollar signs.
It's this project, man.
To like, well, not Axiom, but yeah. Adam's now put dollars amounts to what it's going to cost to actually build this. Now, the piece that's missing that we haven't really talked about behind the scenes is, where does this money come from to build this? And in our case, we had a private lender that was willing to, luckily enough, the good and the bad, if we're going with the good and the bad theme, the good on this project was we had a private lender that could see the value in the project and was willing to loan us basically 100% of the funds to not only build the property, but to buy the land on which the property was built. So we'll skip to the end here. What did we end up? We paid about $410 for the land, I think. Cool. And then we built each building for about $350.
Yeah, I think that, it's pretty close to that. Seems like we were about 3.3 million total for 10 buildings.
Yep. So, and then we had some soft costs when we ended up selling them. So we were all into these about 400-ish, I want to say, So that's where we ended up. But when we started, I think, if I remember right, our estimated construction number was like 270.
Yeah.
So this was back before COVID when we were kind of doing these estimates. We had this big, Jared got the approvals with the city. We're kind of fast forwarding a little bit. We went to planning commission meeting. We basically said, this is what we're building. Do you agree? And they said, yes, we agree. And I mean, that sounded really simple, but there was a ton of little steps and checklists that you needed to go through, which Jared kind of talked about. We got our finance and we started to build. Then what happened? We had COVID happen. Adam already talked a little bit about the increased costs. And then what was our thought process along the way? Because the good thing that was happening along this was the market I mean, the market during COVID was going crazy. So when we were losing dollars by spending more money than we thought we would, we were gaining more dollars because the market was appreciating at a quicker rate. So this project, other than we kind of cut our teeth that it was like the first 10 unit that we've done that was bigger than the 4 units that we had done, there was a little bit of delay because the assemblage of the land took another minute or two. There's probably some delays. Well, there were delays in building because of supply chain, right?
Yeah.
So, but ultimately, all those delays worked out for the best in our case, because when we went to market, when these were fully done with our certificate of occupancy, it was January, February, March of 2022, which was when real estate prices were at an all-time high, interest rates were at an all-time low. And how did we end up? What was our final strategy on that project?
So
as far as exiting it out of it,
the final strategy on exit was to try and sell as many units as we needed to sell to kind of get rid of all of our debt that we had outstanding. And we ended up selling 7 of those, and we kept 3 that we keep as rentals now.
And the beauty about keeping the 3 as rentals is we paid down all our debt, like Jared said, but instead of selling, the 8th or 9th unit to get some profit out of it, we had basically got, what was owed on the project down to like maybe $200,000 or $300,000. And then we did what's called a cash out refinance with a local credit union. So we pulled out $450,000, $500,000 in cash. That's not taxable because it's coming from a refinance from the equity in the property. So we're levered now where we still have maybe $700,000 in equity in those 3 that we kept. We have them rented. We're paying that debt down. We have 3 rentals in brand new units. So that's the good. The bad was that the costs increased during COVID. The good ultimately was that our timing, dumb luck, couldn't have been better, because almost a month or 2 after we sold those, interest rates started going through the roof. So I would say, to summarize that project, the key ingredients, you got to have someone that understands the zoning. That was Jared. Jared understood the zoning for this area. When we saw the land for sale, he knew that it could be something bigger and better than just a single family home. He knew the process with the city. Adam knows building backwards and forwards. So we had confidence that we could build it. And then I had resources where we could finance it. So those are kind of like, you got to know what you're doing. You got to know how you're going to do it. And then you got to be able to pay for it. And then some of it is just dumb luck because no one can control the market. And so at the end of the day, we timed it perfect without knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the good and bad on this one. Next, we're going to talk about the good and bad on the project that we're sitting in right now. And the story is not finished on that one, but we'll kind of tell you where we're at up to this point.